All right, good evening. Are we ready upstairs?
Yes, we are ready.
Okay, welcome to the May 4th, 2023 meeting of the West Sacramento Planning Commission. Tonight's agenda is available on the counter along with requests to speak cards. A reminder to everyone that requests to speak cards should be completed and turned into the clerk prior to the completion of any staff presentation. For those speakers wishing to speak on items not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of this commission, please write item 1 on your card. All speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and televised, so all speakers, in order to be recognized, must be called on by the chair and come forward to the microphone. Speaking in public may cause some individuals to be uncomfortable, so everyone is asked to be professional and respectful at all times. Okay, with that, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And, Commissioner Linker.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Linker. And we'll go to General Administration Function, Part 1, presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the Commission.
We have Alan Hirsch.
Thank you much. Is the timer working this evening? It is great. It wasn't working last night. I hope you all have my slides about adding more lanes to the I-80 freeway and West Sacramento's climate goal. You have an amazing climate goal. I'm very impressed with it. I'm Alan Hirsch. Background, I was a contractor for the city of West Sacramento. I knocked on every door in Bright and Broderick, multiple times giving away trees. I helped plant 500 trees about 15, 20 years ago. It's so gratifying to see the trees thrive now. I'm known in Davis as the Lorax because I pushed the council to improve the trees there too. Your climate plan is amazing. It reflects the priority in your county that of the city that basically the Caltrans is saying that we're going to have a 6.9-foot sea rise by the end of the century, which is going to threaten your city. So we need to address climate. We all need to address climate, but your city in particular. And I'm quite concerned that the I-80 plan, which you are one of the 5 your council representative Dante Early is one of the 5 deciders, is not consistent with reflecting your climate plan. Your climate, you add adding 30. Your climate plan calls for reducing driving by 30% by the end of by 2030, and by 40% by end of 2045. But we're going to add 33% more lanes on the freeway that runs right through the heart of town. That doesn't seem consistent at all. In fact, I don't think we have a consistency at all here, but because we need to reduce greenhouse gases from driving dramatically, not just by switching to electric cars, but also to shift to reduce driving, because 57% of your greenhouse gases are from driving. So if you skip the page, you'll see Caltrans has this massive plan in my thing to basically widen the freeway, encourage driving. But if you skip the Point 4, this is the established science out of UC Davis. If you add 10% more lanes, you get 10% more driving. When you make things easier, people do more of it. So widening the freeway will encourage people to drive more, when instead we want to reduce driving. So it seems to be a contradiction here, especially if we want to address greenhouse gases and save your city from flooding. So, but what's happening is we have this free money from the federal government. On slide 5, you see what's happening. People are saying, are greenwashing, saying, oh, this is an environmentally sustainable freeway widening. That's a contradiction. But we have to struggle. It's a tough problem for the electeds, and I'm hoping there's some courage from you guys and from our electeds to basically push back on Caltrans and the free money. And finally, the last thing is what you need to do. You should put this on your agenda. This should be talked about. We need to talk about it. If you don't talk about this, this is denial. Talk about the I-80 widening and its the impact on your climate change and on growth and development. In fact, you don't want to have people driving across the causeway. When people live in West Sacramento and commute to Sacramento, the growth should happen here and not in Davis and Fairfield and coming to Sacramento. So put this on your agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hirsch.
Chair Sablon. For the record, we did receive written materials, and those were provided to the Planning Commission and made available to the public.
Thank you, and we did receive those. Thank you.
We have no additional requests to speak on item 1.
Thank you. Item 2, correspondence and staff communications from the Planning Commission Secretary. Mr. Berumen, are you doing this?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair Sablon. I did want to share that there will be no Planning Commission meeting on Thursday, May 18th. The mayor will be presiding over the state of the city that evening. And that concludes my updates.
Thank you. Disclosure of ex parte communications. Any commissioners have anything to disclose? Seeing none. Turn to our consent agenda. Consideration and approval of the minutes from the April 20th, 2023 meeting. Any corrections or a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve the April 20th, 2023 minutes.
We have a motion from Commissioner Olivares,
I'll second that motion.
a second from Commissioner Delgado.
Commissioner Delgado,
Aye.
Commissioner Wong,
Aye.
Commissioner Olivares,
Aye.
Commissioner Linker,
Aye.
Commissioner Squires,
Aye.
Vice Chair Jackson,
Aye.
Chair Sablon.
Aye. Thank you. Motion passes. And item 5, public hearing regarding 2370 and 2400 Harmon Road, tentative parcel map 5225, and Mr. Hardy is presenting this.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Commission. Tonight before you is the map at Harmon Road, 2370, 2400. The property is currently 2 lots. They're subdividing it into 4, totaling 4.4 acres. It'll be 4 lots total at 1 acre each. The area is generally surrounded by Perkins to the north, Clarksburg Branch Line to the east, Hillary to the west, and Harmon Road to the south. It is located in the Jefferson subdivision dating back from 1913, which has private roads. It is in the rural core as defined by the general plan and is rural residentially zoned, 1 acre minimum lot. And each of the lots resultant will be in compliance with that. And 2 existing homes are on Harmon Road. The 2 lots that will be resultant of the map, if approved, to the north would be future single-family homes, as I understand it. Subsequent to the report being made public to the Commission and to the greater community, the applicant reached out to staff regarding 4 conditions. The number 3, which the habitat conservation fee. The number 14, which deals with drainage. Item 17 with the soils report, and condition 13 with regards to undergrounding of utilities. We subsequently reached out and met with the applicant to address their concerns. Items 3, 14, and 17 were resolved, and we addressed that with the memo that was provided to the Commission and was posted on the website as well. We have an agreement with that, and the applicant is here tonight to confirm that. After that meeting, historically, though, undergrounding of the utilities previously was looked more on an aesthetics issue with regards to climate change and the effects moving forward. We've looked at it more in a resiliency and an equity standpoint as opposed to previously. More recently, the areas of town, if you look, that are affected by heat and storms are typically where we have the overhead power lines. Many of those are older communities, and some of our most vulnerable residents reside in those areas. However, each project is unique. The applicant requests a waiver of this requirement. In looking at the property, if you could go to slide 3, please. The yellow lines indicate the 3 above-ground utility poles that are along the project frontage. Of the 3, one could be removed, which would be the center one along the 400-foot frontage, because you still have to have the 2 poles on either side to carry the load. On the south side, where the red arrows are the feeders to the southern properties, as I understand it. So this gives you an idea of the undergrounding situation that's out there. If the commission was supportive of waiving this requirement, staff would ask the finding for that. The applicant is in the audience to address any questions or comments from the commission. This concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions the commission may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. Any clarifying questions for Mr. Hardy at this point?
Yes, please. I had a question about original condition number 17. Can you explain why that's being recommended to be removed?
It was no longer needed as this is a private subdivision, as opposed to that condition was more with regards to a public property. And given that this is all private, the principal engineer decided it was no longer applicable.
Thank you.
I have a question on that same point, number 17. So there's no need to mitigate impacts to future improvements on public streets, slabs, and drainage and so forth. The engineer decided that?
These are private streets, and the drainage issue was revised in condition 14. Condition 17 was the soils report.
Right. But it says there could be, from what I read, impacts to future improvements, including public streets, building slabs, and drainage from the groundwater coming up.
So upon building permit submittal, they will have to address any soils report
So there will be soils report?
for construction under the building code.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy.
Okay.
We'll open up the public hearing. Do we have any commenters on this item?
We have Alan Hirsch.
Welcome back.
Hi. Yeah, I have no standing or no position on this, and I just note that when I see the area, I know trees, so I care about trees. When there's overhead lines now, trees and ferrets, or the grand trees we see about overhead lines, they can't be replaced. The new regulations, you're going to plant tiny trees there, so that may affect your decision. You may want to inquire about that, but it's only I share the insight there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hirsch.
We have no additional requests to speak on this item.
Thank you. Bring it back to the commission for deliberation. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Good evening, members. I'm John Pearson. I'm a co-applicant. The other applicant, Linda Kimsey, is here. We own the 2 lots, the 2 2-acre lots down on Harmon Road. We have houses there. Her house is 70-plus years old. Mine's 30. On Harmon, serviced by existing PG&E and cable. There's actually 6 poles that are serving those houses currently. They're on both sides of the street. What we're lost here. The city has asked, essentially, or demanded that we remove all the poles and replace them with undergrounding, which is a reasonable, I understand the purpose in that. However, in this case, it would be totally inequitable. Just to kind of put an umbrella on it, is we're looking at a project that would cost us in excess of $100,000. There'd be 5 poles removed. There'd be 3 put back, because there's necessary to have poles to carry the underground lines. Need a special pole. The power comes in from farther down the road. It hits this new big pole and then goes underground. So while you're taking out some poles and undergrounding, you're actually creating more infrastructure above ground. As I said, there are poles on both sides of the road, and so there'll be poles needed on the other side, because those poles would have to stay because they serve the overhead power that goes to the existing, let me back up. 2 houses on our side affected, 3 houses on the other side, the frontage on the other side of Harmon. Those houses are served by overhead power. Those houses would continue to be served by overhead power lines. So the poles that service those would have to stay or be replaced, or we would have to pay for new service panels, which could cost anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 to install a service panel on somebody else's house. So what we'd like to do, essentially, is in dividing our 2 lots into 4 lots, 2 rear lots, the new lots, are going to be connected to utilities through the Perella Estates subdivision, which is being built out now. So the new lots would be totally undergrounded. The existing lots, what we're asking is a waiver so that the existing lots would remain in the infrastructure the way it is now. The houses across the street wouldn't be affected. Nobody would be affected. Now, the cost benefit analysis just doesn't work out. We'd be hiring an engineering firm to look at moving essentially 5 power and installing new power. We'd be digging a ditch. We'd be crossing subterranean utilities. A gas line is out. We'd be hiring a construction firm to undertake the contract. We'd be installing conduits. We'd need 2 new transformers, which cost anywhere from $7,000 to $10,000 a piece. Because the transformers currently are on the poles, those would have to go. We'd be trenching, we'd be repaving Harmon Road. No doubt, because of all the trenching that would be going on, that the city would ask us to repave the road and bring it up to a modern standard. Who knows what that would be? We'd be reinstalling telephone lines, cable lines, and the power. We'd be paying fees to PG&E, which are astronomical. We'd be, it would be a requirement to, or it would be obviously be a requirement that we'd be coordinating with PG&E and AT&T and Wave Cable to bring everybody together on this. They all charge fees for these kinds of things. You know, you don't, shall we say, disturb their infrastructure without paying them fees. So it's easily could reach $100,000, and it very likely would exceed that. Now, the other thing in terms of the equity, there are poles on Harmon Road, which is about a half-mile long, essentially, a little more. There are poles on both sides of the road now. 3 subdivisions have been built out. There are 3 housing projects have been built out on the north side of Harmon in the last couple of years. Now, because of the way the law works, those subdivisions did not have to underground on Harmon. So Harmon would continue to, everything would be above Harmon for, everything would be above ground on Harmon for about 2,000 feet. And then when they got to our little 2-house stretch, it'd be undergrounded, but it really wouldn't be undergrounded because there'd be poles on both sides anyway. The poles would remain. So it doesn't make sense to say, okay, you 2 got to underground when the rest of Harmon is not going to be affected. Now, the Flip side of that is our new properties, the new lot, will be underground because they're coming in from the north side. The utilities are there already for that subdivision, the Perella Estates. So we would already be, we'd be meeting the intent of the law, which is to underground new subdivisions. It's just that because of the unique thing we're doing here, we would like to retain the existing infrastructure up front, that is to exist, and put in the new. So that's essentially, inartfully perhaps, but that's basically what it comes down to. We are undergrounding. We're just not undergrounding all 4 lots. We're not changing the front lots, the front houses. We're not changing anything up there. We're just saying leave it alone. So that's the big issue. Now, there is one other issue. They revised the condition number 3, which deals with the Yolo Habitat Conservancy, and they're indicating that the way the condition originally read required that we do a screening form and pay the applicable mitigation fee. No problem with either of those, except the timing of the payment of the mitigation fee, which I think we've agreed upon. That was just something we negotiated with the city. The piece that we're objecting to is now they're asking for a new screening form be submitted to the Conservancy. And I know that doesn't sound like much, but it isn't something you do yourself. You hire an ecological firm. They ask you for $3,000 up front. They come out to your property, spend a day looking at plants and bugs and all the stuff they do, and they write a report, and it ends up costing $5,000 when it's all said and done. The city's demanding that we do that again, and it's like, once is enough. So that's kind of my objection to that. And it might have been that Justin and Dave and so on didn't understand what I thought we had an agreement that the form has been submitted, been processed. It's just a question of when we pay the mitigation fee, which right now is $18,000. So,
Thank you.
and that's it. Questions?
Thank you. We'll bring it back to the commission. Do you have any questions for the applicant? We don't have any questions for the applicant at this
Great.
time. Thank you.
you.
Just before we start, can we get clarification on that second part on the mitigation fee submittal of the screening report?
So
Do they have to resubmit it, or?
They submitted the screening form,
Uh-huh,
and the fee needs to be paid, so it's really the timing of the fee.
uh-huh,
So it needs to, what was originally agreed upon previously was later, and we don't have as much of enforcement, and we don't have that latitude. So we revised the timing where we have sort of they need the map in order to move forward, and they would have to pay the fee at that time. So the screening was done and submitted to the Conservancy.
oh, so it's not requiring them to resubmit it, they've already satisfied that part,
Correct. It's just the
Okay.
fee, that timing of the fee.
okay.
Applicant, did you hear city staff's response in regards to the screening fee or screening form and associated fee?
The agreement that I had worked out with the Conservancy was, in which they said that was their authority, was that the mitigation fee would be paid at the time that we submitted a building permit, which neither of us have any, plan at this time to build anything on either of those lots. So essentially, I think the city has usurped the role of the Conservancy. The Conservancy decides when it gets paid. City. Or So that's an issue that needs to be hammered out. I mean, I've got emails all over the place between me and the Conservancy working it out. And it was originally, I have emails from city staff saying that that's fine. So now they've come along and said, no, we want you to pay it right up front when we go to file our final map. I mean, we may never build on that lot. So that's something that has to be worked out. Seems to be a misunderstanding.
Thank you.
So an email was sent by a previous project manager. In subsequent emails with Charlie Shuden, who is the HCP representative, it is the discretion of the city to when the fee is applicable. And so we have revised the condition for standards. When a building permit comes forth to someone to buy the property, then be levied with this on top and then track that. And they may not know about it. So then in the end, they're faced with a fee they didn't anticipate. So this is a standard condition written in timing. So I understand there was a previous email that was addressed by the previous project manager on this, but we have the discretion from the HCP that we have the discretion to timing.
Okay, and the issue with timing it with the building permit would be planning has no way to track that? Is that?
It's an administrative burden to track that, and also if it doesn't track, someone in the end to get the permit would have to pay the fee, and that's a burdensome on to follow that all the way to a building permit stage and whoever buys the property. So this is a standard condition that we apply to timing of that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hardy. Any questions from the commissioners?
I just had one last question for city staff. So I understand we're trying to tease this out right now, but is there, assuming that we approve with the modified conditions, does that still leave room for opportunity for city staff and the applicant to come to a shared understanding as to what's being required? Sounds like that. Or do we use this platform to sort that out now?
Are you asking staff and the applicant to work out this condition?
Yeah, it says initially the applicant contacted staff regarding a few of the recommended conditions, so I'm led to believe that that already occurred, but it sounds like there's still some ongoing questioning of the screening form and the associated fees, so I'm wondering, to better situate the commissioners for taking action on this item, is there still room for opportunity for the applicant and city staff to negotiate whatever needs to be clarified, or do we sort that out now?
We could be directed as, from the commission to staff to work with the applicant to revise the condition and bring that back before the commission, or the commission could word the condition taking those into effect, and then we basically have it rewritten tonight, and then if the commission moved forward with a decision, that would include the revised condition of approval.
Yeah, so I think it sounds like the applicant and city staff thought you could come to a meeting of the minds on the revision, but now it's sounding like there hasn't been. And I don't know if the commission's in the best position to negotiate this on the fly, or if staff has a recommendation to address this.
Chair Sablon, just an interjection. Just looking at our municipal code, and it does state that the fees can be paid at the building permit stage.
And so, Mr. Baruman, is that something city staff is recommending or comfortable with revising?
We would be comfortable if that's the commission's wishes.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'd like to direct a question to the applicant, please. So You said that you currently have no intentions of building on these 2 new parcels, should the parcel be approved, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
That doesn't mean we won't. I can't tie my hands. My wife and I have no intent of building any time in the foreseeable future.
Okay. Could you explain the background to why you're choosing to split these parcels then?
Yeah, it's purely self-interest. Our houses are on wells and septic. The subdivision behind us is fully modernized. So her lot is a little bit less than 2 acres. My lot is a little bit more than 2 acres. So this application actually is a lot line shift, and then the lots split. While we discussed it and decided that while we were doing the lot line shift so that her lot could become fully 2 acres so that she could divide, that it made sense in the course of that to go ahead and split for future, well, for the value of our properties, for one thing. But also we're doing some cross easements because sewer and water lines are going to have to cross her new lot to get to my lot. So there's just a lot of little pieces coming together, and it made sense to go ahead and let's just do the lot split while we're at it. While we're here with all our maps and surveyors and everything else, let's just get it done. So that's kind of it. Nothing sneaky about it. It's just the way it works.
So would it be a fair assessment that we're being asked to waive a number of fees and requirements specifically to drive up the value of your own properties?
No, you mean the undergrounding?
Well, both the undergrounding and the payment of the fee to the Conservancy.
Well, let's get the Conservancy straightened out. That fee will have to be paid at such time as that property is changed, grade or whatever, then it'll have to be paid. That rule is a Conservancy. They told me that we didn't have to pay it until we graded. I'm just trying to hold the city to the rule that applies to the Conservancy. In terms of we're splitting just solely to help our, to drive up the value of our property, that is a byproduct, externality of what we're doing. But mostly, and I'll tell you straight up, when this project, when I first became aware of the subdivision going in and that there would be a water line very close to my property, that was the first thing I wanted. I have nothing but trouble with my well and it has lousy water. Secondly, I'm getting rid of a sewer system, a septic system, which is really what everybody wants, get the sewers out of the ground, get the septic tanks out of the ground. So I'm taking advantage of that, and I'm paying to install all of that. I'm going to have $50,000 in this project. If you ask me to spend another $50,000, it's not even going to cover the value, what I might add to my property. So, I'm a little bit offended actually by your question, but that's your prerogative. I mean, everybody does everything for money. You go to work so you can get paid. I mean, come on. So anyway, there's my hot head going on.
All right. Thank you for your response.
Vice Chair Jackson, did you have a question?
I did, and it was pertaining more towards the fee aspect. I know there's the concerns about being able to track it in the future as if the lots are developed and things like that. But is there a way where those fees could be a part of a disclosure statement if the lots were sold prior, as the lots are being sold, that's a part of the disclosure process that, hey, there is this fee that needs to be paid on this parcel. I'm not sure if that's in the bounds of the jurisdiction that would fall under, or
Mr. Campbell may be able to answer that for us.
Okay, this is working? Okay. Yes, that could be part of the disclosures, but real estate transactions can be imperfect sometimes. The first time I bought a house, there was something that should have been disclosed that wasn't, that came back around, that, you know, it happens. Granted, my first house was 109 years old, so, you know, there were a lot of owners. But that's, I think that when they talk about administrative burden of holding on to these things, that's probably what he's talking about, is that, you know, who knows when the real estate transaction occurs. If, for example, it occurs because the owner is deceased, and then someone has to, you know, gather everything together who doesn't necessarily know. That would be my take on that.
How much is the fee?
18,000
$18,000. Okay.
right now. It might go up. I mean, we're playing a little gamble because it could go up every year. You know, there might be an advantage to paying it now. Look at that.
Commissioner Olivares?
So I would say that my impasse is solely tied to the applicant only raising the concern to the revised condition number 3. I am interested in hearing from my fellow commissioners, but I would just suggest that, if not saying that anyone's right or wrong, but if we can come to a shared agreement as to what we think is fair and right at this juncture of where we're at, I think I'd be okay with making a motion.
I think as Mr. Berman pointed out, the commission does have some discretion on that the code allows us to approve something where the fee is paid at the time of the building permit, correct?
Correct, and we could revise it to essentially say, prior to the issuance of building permits on each undeveloped lot, the subdivider shall comply with Title 20 of the city's municipal code.
Commissioner
I have a
Squires?
question. So in that case, if one lot is sold, then would they pay half that fee and wait for the other lot to be sold, and then they would pay the other
No.
half? Or would the first person have to pay the whole thing?
I'm sorry to interrupt you. The fee only applies to one of the 2 lots. The rules on how they apply the fees are very complex. The Conservancy told us that it would only apply to my lot, unfortunately, but that's, so only when my lot is developed or sold, or, well, developed, would that fee attach. Ms. Kimsey's lot is not subject.
And so we were saying that today the fee is 18,000, but
Right.
as you mentioned, you're taking the risk in that the fee can increase over time. So
Right.
if it was 40K, you know, 10
Selling
years
the
from
house
now.
and running, yeah.
No, I understand. I just, since we're on the record, you know, and I do appreciate the open dialogue, but I just want to make sure that we, you know, can be open and honest about, should we consider we revise the condition with a clause that still allows for the fee to be paid at the time the building permit is approved, that you equally agree to the risk associated with the fee increasing until that occurs.
Yes,
I
to
appreciate
answer that.
I appreciate that.
And I apologize for the back and forth. I appreciate doing it. Apologize.
You have an opportunity to public speak, and we appreciate the dialogue, but thank you for your apology.
Yeah.
I think I'll be ready to make a motion unless any of my other commissioners have.
Commissioner Squires?
I have a question. So the fee is due to be paid to the Conservancy or to the city?
Conservancy.
So why is the city concerned about keeping track of it? It seems like the Conservancy should keep track of when that fee is due and how much it is, and the city could not worry about it.
Well, that would be my understanding, but
Yeah, Commissioner Squires, the Conservancy is a joint powers agency amongst all the jurisdictions in the county, including West Sacramento. So ultimately, and also the HCP is replicated in the city's municipal code in Title 20. So we share an obligation to make sure that the HCP is implemented properly, because it is subject to state and federal oversight and auditing, and it's a 50-year permit that we have been granted by the state and federal wildlife agencies. So the city absolutely has a role as we have, as for example, one of our council members sits on the board of the conservancy. So it is it's not wholly independent from the city.
Thank you. And we do have the other issue of waiving the undergrounding. I don't know if we have deliberation on that or if commissioners are ready on that.
Well, just to make, for my own clarification, so basically the undergrounding, the way that it's been talked about now is that would have to underground the current lots and only for those current lots and not necessarily for the lots that are being created, because those lots then will tie into the new housing development.
They're asking for the other way. So the existing lines would stay up and then.
Right, but if we require the undergrounding, we're just requiring it for the two existing houses.
Well,
But not the two new lots, because the two new lots will tie into the new housing development.
yeah, and they wouldn't have.
Right, because they're already be underground because of the new housing development.
Mr. Hardy?
We have Candido Ramirez from Development Engineering who can be more in this discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Mr. Pearson did a good job explaining the situation. So I'm here just to point out that the details and the scope of undergrounding would be developed by PG&E and the communications companies at a later date. Based on the current knowledge of what's out there now, there could be two potential scenarios. And one of them would be to only underground the utilities on the north side of Harmon Road. The other scenario would be a lot more involved. It would underground the utilities on the south side. That scenario we wouldn't recommend at all. The intent of this condition would be only to underground the utilities on the north side. So I hope that makes sense. Thank you.
Can you clarify on the net loss? I think the applicant said there would be only 2 poles lost, whereas I think Mr. Hardy said there would be 1 pole lost. What's the total?
So those are the details that I'm not qualified, and the only people that are qualified to quantify are PG&E and the cable companies. If I gave you quantities, I would be misleading you. So.
And can you answer? Would there still be? There would be some number of poles that would need to stay up or be put up.
The poles that would remain would be at the end poles of the stretch here, because obviously we can't underground beyond this property, this parcel map. So does that make sense?
Yeah. Any other questions on this from the commissioners?
I do have one question. Considering quite the major impact that our city had with this past winter with a lot of the above ground lines sustaining a lot of damage during the storms, is there any plans on the city's part to underground any current above ground lines in the city?
I'm not aware of specific plans. New capital projects that come along, new development projects. All new development projects are underground, have underground utilities. And again, most of the capital projects that are underway are being undergrounded. Like, for example, Fifth Street and Riverfront, those are being converted from overhead to underground. So,
Thank you.
I just had one other clarification question. You said it's not recommended for the lines on the south side of Harmon to be underground. May I ask why?
because that would be unfair to the applicant to this parcel map. It would involve undergrounding from the poles on the south side road to the electrical panels and on the residents on the south side, and that's plainly unfair.
Really, once you get beyond the tentative map boundaries, and this is something that comes up a lot over the years with these smaller parcel maps where, you want to go to underground, but it can really start to snowball. And, beyond, the project site, since all these things are literally interconnected. So we have typically struggled with this over the years because, you can take down a couple poles. You end up instead of having poles on the frontage, you just move them to the corners. And then in this case where it's tied to going across the street, then you can see where it can start to really snowball, and it goes really beyond I think the limits of what is a relatively small project. So in this case, if the commission absolutely has the authority to waive the undergrounding requirement, if that were the commission's direction, staff would not object to that being part of your decision.
Thank you, Mr. Tilley. Any further questions from the commission? Any deliberation? I think in this case, we do try to underground with all new projects, but we've heard from staff and the applicant, and the resilience factor isn't really, I don't know if we're getting a net gain here with such a small parcel, but.
Chair, this may have been included in the materials, so please excuse me if it has. Was there analysis done on whether or not the requirement and or benefits or lack thereof of undergrounding versus not?
I think this question's for city staff.
Let me try to take that one. Not being the utility engineers ourselves, but recognize, having gone through these, that it's common in this scenario to have a relatively small net loss of poles. In this case, maybe one or two, at most. So is the cost of doing that work worth it for that relatively modest gain? And I think Chair Sablon would talk about from a resiliency standpoint, is a net loss of one or two poles really going to move the needle from a resiliency standpoint in this particular part of our community? This is really an example of something in the ideal world would be done much more comprehensively, where you have logical endpoints for undergrounding. Very difficult to do parcel by parcel and really achieve much net gain in terms of reduction of number of poles and overhead lines. So at least empirically, it seems that this particular one that there would be a lot of expense and work to do for a relatively modest gain. And so I would ask the commission to consider that part of its deliberations on this matter, because as much as in an ideal world we want all this stuff undergrounded, we have to recognize that there is considerable cost associated with it. And we would hope that if that work were to be done and that cost to be imposed upon an applicant, that the net gain of it be commensurate with that level of effort and expense. And it seems like on this one that it may not be commensurate with that level of expense for the net gain of perhaps one or two less poles.
Thank you for the on-the-fly analysis, Mr. Tilley.
And I think where my mindset is definitely respect and looking out for the fiscal impact on the applicant, but also wanting to understand, being is that I'm not a utility expert, is also looking out into the future and or what those requirements may be down the line should the applicant no longer be the parcel owner. I understand we're making a today decision off the information that's in front of us, but looking ahead and what is going to be the expectation of underground utility running, just making sure that while we are factoring in the fiscal impact on the applicant, we're also making a business decision with the thought in mind of what the future might look like for an underground utility running requirement. I hope that makes sense.
I'd like to follow up on that question. As it comes to undergrounding, we're typically looking at a reduction in forest fires or wildfires. Can anyone tell me whether this is a local responsibility area or if there's any sort of high risk of fire in the area?
Well,
or to the new construction especially?
Well, just so happens we have our fire marshal here tonight who might be able to opine upon that.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Brian Johnson, Fire Marshal. Can you ask the question, was a concern of removing the poles to address wildfire risk?
Yeah.
Well, I can't say I'm a professional in that aspect. I do understand fire and the overhead utility that has potential to cause. So I think any overhead pole that we remove could potentially decrease the threat. But, you know, when we talk about wildfire, the city of West Sacramento isn't a wildfire prone city. We don't have any identified wildland-urban interface in the city. So you can't directly relate it, but in general, if you remove the overhead utilities, there's potential to reduce the risk to the city.
Thank you. That was the response I was looking for. Were there any other?
Did you have a follow-up question?
No, sorry.
No, no questions.
Thank you.
Just
Motion.
Just one question. Do you happen to have, don't want to put you on the spot, any readily available statistic as to what the causes of fires in our city have been attributed to as a result of the above ground?
You know, I off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you that we've had one, you know, but in the history of the fire department, I'm sure there may be a case, but I can't speak to that. I can get back to the commission if you'd like to know, but that's nothing that I don't have at hand. Sorry.
Thank you, Fire Marshal.
Absolutely.
No. Commissioner Delgado?
So I would like to make the motion to waive number 23.
Is that a motion to approve the staff recommendation with revisions and removing and waiver?
No, just to remove that one specifically.
Okay.
To approve the waiver, since that wasn't presented to us in the memorandum this afternoon.
So I'm looking at our council here just to see should this be.
I think I understand what Commissioner Delgado is trying to do here, and I think that that the appropriate way to do this would be to incorporate that change into your motion to approve the site, the map, parcel map number 5225.
Yeah. So I think we would need a motion to approve staff recommendations with staff's revisions and with the change to waive the underground utility.
That sounds right.
So for clarification, we're waiving the underground requirement?
That was the motion by Commissioner
That's in the
Delgado.
motion, okay.
Yes, correct.
Would the maker of the motion entertain a revision subject to approval from the city attorney's office regarding the timing of paying the applicable habitat mitigation fees to be that at building permit rather than grading or final map?
No, I would continue to accept city's recommendation that it remain as the revised condition number 3.
So can we just clarify what the motion is on the table right now?
Yeah, sorry, okay. This will be a mouthful, but I'd like to make the motion to approve the tentative parcel map with staff revisions, including the recommendation to waive item number 23, revised condition number 3, revised condition number 14, and revised condition number 17.
Do we have a second on that motion? An amendment?
Yes, I think number 3 should go to building permit. And the rest of it, accepted as it is.
So counsel, for this, if we have a motion on the table that doesn't get a second, does it
Motion fails if there
dies?
does, yes.
Okay. So, okay, with that, no second on that motion fails. We can entertain another motion. Commissioner Squires, did you want to make that motion with that?
I have a quick question.
Sorry, Commissioner Linker. Oh, Commissioner Olivares.
Just really quickly, I think I can get on board with Commissioner Linker on the revised condition 3. For my comfort, what other option would we have to consider waiving the underground utility running? I don't know if I have enough information in front of me today to make a well-informed decision. While I understand the arguments have been presented today, but is there any wiggle room in that consideration?
I think if what you're looking for is further explanation about the impact on waiving that condition, that you would have to table this or move on. Yes.
Applicant, do you have any reservation in, if the commission were to consider to take no action, to allow for further information to consider your request of waiving the underground requirement?
Yes, in that it completely, it just derails our project that much longer. We applied for this project, we started this project more than 18 months ago. We have done everything within weeks when we've been asked to fix a map, do whatever, and the city takes forever. Excuse me, guys, it's the facts. So one, that's one issue. And two, I'm not sure what else there is to say about the undergrounding. We're going to partially underground at great expense is essentially what, if that's one option. The other option is you waive that requirement.
Can I say a couple things?
Yeah.
I do this for a living. Okay.
Can
When
you
you're my name is Rick Hart, for the record.
Are you the applicant?
I've been helping the applicant. I'm the subdivider for the Capital Estates and Perella Estates. We're the one that brought in the underground for them. So when we underground, when we come off of a pole, we have to set an underground pole. So the one pole Justin talks about will be replaced with a pole that will be used for undergrounding. They will not let us underground off an old existing pole. We have to sink another one. Okay, now, when you run this underground on the north side, you're going to have to go underground to the other side of the street. And over there, because you can't force the neighbors to put new panels in, so you're going to have to put 2 new poles on the opposite side of the street. So there'll be no net loss in poles. You'll come out the same on the south side, and you'll pick up 2 new ones on the north. And his estimate for that cost at 100 is not even close. It'll be closer to 200 to 250. This is what they call a forced relocate. Okay, when you build the new ones on the backside, like where we brought him the power, he gets credits from PG&E because he's providing a new customer to him. On the other side, no credit. That means $25,000 in engineering from AT&T, $25,000 in engineering from Wave, and God knows what PG&E is going to charge it because you got no new customers, so there's no offsets. So when we do a project, they calculate, have these actuaries, nobody knows how they do it, but they come up with a credit on how much power they're going to generate, and they use that to reimburse us for our expenses when we put in the new power. And if you see where I've went underground in multiple spots out there where I've taken the power from the pole, I always have to sink a pole next to it. It's completely ridiculous. I've argued with them. It doesn't work. There's a pole right next to it, so that we will get one more pole. You'll lose the one in the middle, but we will have to put a pole to go underground.
And that's what he meant, that's what the
Yeah, he was trying to spit it out, but it was sentence fragments, so I needed to come up here and spit it out.
No, you're doing a great job. But just to clarify, he did mention that we're technically already underground. That's
on the new. And the way the motion should read, I actually sat up there for the first 4 years the city was incorporated. It should be the existing homes would be exempt. The new lots, they would be required for the undergrounding. The existing homes that are already built, they would be the ones that were waived. And we've already undergrounded the power. We brought it in with water. They're going to be off septic, and they're going to, those lots, I mean, we're getting $1.6 million for those homes. So the tax bases you're going to get for many years to come. So there's an advantage to the city too, not just to the developer.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. And just a follow-up, the fire marshal and city staff would be amendable to us approving the waiver with Mr. Hart's follow-up explanation.
Yeah, I think Mr. Tilley said that staff doesn't object to the waiver.
Did you guys have any other questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Hart.
No problem.
I'd like to go ahead and make the motion to approve staff's recommendation with Mr. Berlin going on the record with the revised condition 3. And I'd also like to make the motion to waive the underground utility requirement. Am I missing anything?
For existing.
For existing new parcels. Am I missing anything else?
Yeah, we have a motion from Commissioner Olivares and a second from Commissioner Squires.
Commissioner Olivares?
Aye.
Commissioner Linker?
Aye.
Commissioner Squires?
Aye.
Commissioner Wong?
Aye.
Commissioner Delgado?
Nay.
Vice Chair Jackson?
I'm going to abstain just because I'm not exactly sure what we're approving still. So I'll abstain.
Chair Sablon?
Aye. Okay, with that, the motion passes. Yes.
Chair Sablon, for the record, any interested party may appeal the decision of the Planning Commission on this matter. The City Council by filing a written appeal with the City Clerk of the City of West Sacramento within 10 calendar days of tonight's action, and that appeal must be accompanied by the appropriate filing fee.
Thank you, Mr. Baru. Okay. Good luck to the applicants. Thank you. Turn to Administrative Function, Part 2, Commissioner Communications. Any communications? Seeing none, meeting is adjourned.